Welcome to the holiday, Pesach holiday, impromptu talk by Rabbi Pinchas Winston. This was not planned, so we expect an exciting surprise. It is entitled See Split. It is sponsored by the Bring Them Home organization that you can find at bringthemhome.org.il. You can also are encouraged to go to Israel Torah YouTube channel, the youtube.com/Israel Torah. There you can sign up and you can press notifications, subscribe and press notifications in order to get this and many other live webinars that we sponsor. You are also encouraged to visit the rabbi's website called 36.org, where you can find his books and his talks and much more. So without further ado, Rabbi Winston.
Thanks. Chag Sameach. As Josh pointed out, we weren't planning this, but he's working. There's no reason why I shouldn't be working too, especially since we're now getting close to the end of the Chag, the holiday. It's a special opportunity that, aside from the fact that we eat a lot of interesting food and delicious food for that matter, gain a lot of weight probably too. But it's something that has to be talked out because like everything in life in general, but certainly when it comes to Torah Judaism, that there's so much below the surface, and you just have to poke your head down, like break the surface of the water, so to speak. And in this case, water is very appropriate because Torah is water as compared to water, and take a look at what's going on below the surface, because that's where all the opportunity actually is, and it's important for us to do that, because otherwise it comes and it goes, and before you know it's over, and you're putting everything away, and you didn't gain, aside from the weight, didn't gain that much from what the holiday has to offer. This is not just a technical run through. This is not just a commemoration. We hold very specifically, and Kabbalah says it right out, that every holiday is a door opening to a different era, a different epoch, a different level of divine light. Like, it's not a light that is applicable today. If the light was available today easily, we wouldn't require a holiday to access it. But it's a light that especially Pesach, corresponds to much later in history. So it's a much higher, more intense level light with tremendous potential to allow us to accomplish great things. And when Pesach rolls around, especially Leil Seder, the first night, that door opens up, and you have to be ready to use it. You have to, be willing to make the effort to get out of it what it has to offer. So that's the way I felt tonight. But tonight's class, just in a sense, this is more of an opportunity for me than anyone else listening, because it allows me to focus myself on these ideas and to remind myself what we're trying to accomplish and get to. But we'll start kind of in a roundabout way, because it is Shvi Shel Pesach. It's the seventh day of Pesach, which basically traditionally that's the time the Jewish people actually crossed the sea. The sea split for them on the seventh day of Pesach. Some people even have a tradition to set up buckets of water and walk through it on the night of it itself to celebrate the miracle that took place. We did actually walk through it to the next morning. The sea began to split, as the Torah says, the night before. The next morning we walked through, and it was a phenomenal miracle just on a simple level. The very fact that there was these walls of water, and you have dry ground, and you could see the fish and whatever inside the walls of the sea, and you can actually reach in and grab a fish or two or something, to eat. And the Gemara says even further. It says that actually it's split in 12 lanes, one for each of the 12 tribes. They actually had their own lane, and not just that, but it didn't go across. It actually went in a semicircle. They actually went in a semicircle, and they ended up back on the same side, but the Egyptians got drowned along the way, and all the riches washed up on the shore. And I guess the tribe on the inside got across faster, or around faster, because it's a smaller semicircle. But lots and lots of miracles. As you see in the Haggadah itself talks about how many miracles took place at the sea, not just in Egypt, but also at the sea. And there's a lot going on there. But one particular point that for me was a game changer. It was a really interesting idea, very, very deep idea, for a number of reasons, because it answers a very important question, but it also sets up a perspective on life that is important to understand for the sake of being able to make the most out of life, to be able to understand how God works in this world and to work with God, because that's what we're always doing. We're partners. We're here to be partners with God in our own personal fulfillment. We work together with God to achieve our own personal fulfillment, but also to bring creation to fulfillment. That's the opportunity. And you have to know your partner. You have to know who you're working with and how he works, and what the opportunity actually is to participate in that process. So that comes out very much here. And it's something that gets overlooked tremendously. But the story is they get to the seashore. Well, do that tongue twisting thing about the seashore, but they get to the seashore, and of course their backs are to the water. The Egyptians are up there, ready to pounce, ready to attack. That's their thing. And there's a pillar of fire that separates the two camps so that they can't get to each other. Or at least the Egyptians can't get to the Jewish people. And then God splits the water in fantastic style. And of course, the Jewish people are able to cross it, and the Egyptians follow, thinking that it's their God who actually is doing this to trap the Jews. And they follow, not Pharaoh, he stays on the shore, but the army goes in, and of course the water starts to cave in on the Egyptians, and they get drowned. And they are finding things in the sea, like wheels of chariots and things like that. And there's actually I think a stone down by a certain point called Piachirus, which has an Egyptian name as well for their god, their Avodah Zarah. And there's a inscription that says this is the place that the Egyptian army went down to its destruction. It doesn't say why or how, but this is where they went in the sea somewhere. And it's been there for a long time. I think they were using to tie camels and things like that. But it's there. And I actually saw this in Immanuel Velikovsky's book, who was a scientist, a Russian scientist who was not a believer. And back around I think 1948, he was on a sabbatical, and he decided that he was either going to prove or disprove the exodus from Egypt. And I think he certainly didn't believe it in the beginning, but how could so many people have a story like this, and yet there's no truth? On the other hand, there was no evidence at that time for it. So he began to investigate all of that to see where the evidence was and why it didn't exist. Today, they actually have certain satellite imaging processes where they actually can look down at the earth. I think they developed this to discover oil, to find where oil was below the earth's surface without having to dig all the time and just pot luck, just trying to reach where it might possibly be. So now they can actually discover cavities in the earth 25, 30 feet below the surface. And in the process of doing this, they actually turned it on the Sinai Desert, and they found that there's like 25 feet below the surface, there's like a level of ground that's packed, very tightly packed in a way that would only happen there if you had millions of people walking over it at one time. A tremendous piece of evidence in favor of the Jewish people crossing the desert and getting to the Yam Suf, getting from Yam Suf to Eretz Yisrael. Not that we need proof. The Torah says it. We believe that. But it is obviously fun to see and hear things like that. But one part of the story that comes out is actually alluded to in the special song that the Jewish people sang to thank God for the miracle. It's called the Shir Shel Yam, right? The song that they sang at the sea. If you look at the Sefer Torah, set up like bricks, like what we call Shira. It's different than a song you hear on the radio or you sing at the Shabbos table. It's Shira is more like a vision. It's like a prophecy. It's like a poem almost in a sense that praises God for some fantastic miracle that's taken place. And it's distinguished in the Torah by the way they actually write the verses. They're very short. They are built. It looks like a brick structure, the way in the Sefer Torah itself. Check it out for yourself. And in there are different verses referring to God and what he's done, and how great he is, and the miracles, and what happened to the Egyptians, etc., etc., etc. And one of the verses in there says, Yemincha Hashem tir'atz oyev. The right hand of Hashem versus the Koyach is great in strength. And then it says, and the right hand smashes the enemy. Tir'atz oyev, which is what happened. God went ahead and drowned the Egyptians, smashed the enemy. He smashed them in Egypt with the Eser Makos, the 10 plagues, and then he smashed whatever was left of the army, and apparently a lot of it, in the sea by drowning them. And the Jewish people saw this; they got across, and they were, praised God for this by putting right in the song itself that the right hand of God, because right is strength. Right, the right is the strong hand of God that destroyed the enemy. Tears Oyev. We say this every day in Pesukei de Zimre, the introductory psalms that we say in advance of Shacharis, the morning prayer, and we say it on Shabbos too. It's a very important part of the prayer that we say in the morning. And even though you don't have to stand up for it, many people do stand up for it because it's such an important prophecy and thankfulness for this fantastic miracle that took place to save the Jewish people. And no one thinks twice about it. I mean, every verse, first of all, the words are hard to understand. So you look at Rashi, for example, who explains the Chumash. So you get to the Shir Shal Yam. There's not a lot of verses, but a lot of Rashis. Like 2/3 of the page is Rashi explaining these verses and bringing examples what they're talking about. So, but that's poetry. That's the way it works. That's Shira in the Torah. And we don't think much more than what Rashi's explaining. But of course, there's always Sod, there's always Kabbalah, there's always the Rizal. And the Rizal, he comes along and he opens the whole thing up. The truth is the Zohar also discusses this, but the Rizal explains it more in depth. And the Rizal says, look at the words Tiratz, crushes, Oyev, enemy, and you'll notice, I mean, I didn't notice until he pointed it out, but after he pointed it out, you will notice that the letters Tiratz actually spell the word Saras, which Sarat or Sarat, depends how you pronounce it, but Saras basically is translated into English as leprosy. But in the Chumash, it's like a special, it's a spiritual, it's a physical ailment that first affects a person's clothing, their house and their clothes, and eventually the body. But it comes for a spiritual reason, not due to an infection, physical infection, not due to some physical illness. It comes because God sends it to the person. And one of the main reasons why he's speaking Lashon Hara about somebody else, even about Eretz Israel, speaking derogatorily in a way that's not permissible, a person will get these things on their hands and on their body, whatever the case may be. And when it happens, they're sent outside the camp. And as Rashi explains, where the Gemara explains, that this is one of the ways that God wakes the person up to what they've done, because when you speak Lashon Hara about somebody, then you cause people to separate from one another. You can cause breakups in relationships. It's the opposite of achdus, of unification. So the Torah says, if you're going to be someone who's going to cause this to happen to others, so we're going to let it happen to you. So we're going to let it, you should be sent out of the camp for 7 days. It's a whole procedure for becoming purified. It's a balagad. It's a balagad. It's not we're speaking Lashon Hara, that's for sure. Today we don't have it so much. Maybe you bite your lip or something, but we don't. Some people don't feel so afraid to speak Lashon Hara. But in those days they were, because it was a difficult situation to get out of and to go through, and embarrassing on top of all of that. So that's why Tsaras came to a person. So what we're doing here, we don't know yet. But the word Oyev, which means enemy, is actually also the letters Eov. Aleph, Yud, Vav, Beis, Eov. Now, who is Eov? In English, that's Job, right? And Job is somebody who, you look at the story itself, it's kind of strange. It actually begins very differently than every other book of Tanakh. Usually what happens in Tanakh and the Chumash, the story begins somewhere that it builds towards, gives you background information, and then it builds towards the main point, and then it moves on. Not the book of Eov. The book of Eov starts off in a very unusual way. This is God talking to the Satan, the Sitra Achra, the devil, what do you want to call him, and the Sitra Achra has been roaming the earth. And he comes back and he says to God, I have gone all through this earth, all through this world of yours. I've checked on everybody. And I got to tell you, there's been nobody as righteous as Avraham Avinu. He was special. He was Yotzim Neklal. He was unique. No one like him. And God doesn't say, you're right. He was definitely like, God says, oh yeah? Have you checked out my righteous Eov, my righteous Job? Have you checked him out? I know who he is, but no, he's really good. He's a special, and the Gemara talks about how wonderful a person he was. I mean, he was generous and he was humble, and he was full of blessing. People, he gave money out, and when he gave money out, right, people who had it were blessed with it. They couldn't say enough nice things about Eov. And still, the Sitra Achra says, yeah, but you made him rich. He's got a nice family, lots of kids. Everything's going well for him. Who wouldn't be a righteous person like that? So now the bet's on, right? So guy says, no, he's through and through. He's the real deal, this Eov. And the Sitra Achra says, can we test him? Right? God says, yep, you can take away his money, you can inflict his body with the boils, which is like tsaras. It's a form of tsaras, basically, the boils, and you'll see. He'll stay true to me. And he does exactly that. And Eov does stay true. And then, it's a disaster. I mean, his children are having a big feast together, and the house collapses and kills everybody. All this is just wipes them out. All the money he had gets lost one way, another way, and he's broken. He's poor. He goes from the height of heights to the lows of low. And yet, what does he say? I came into this world with nothing. I will leave this world with nothing. And God is just. I mean, I missed the bus. And I start questioning, where's God when I need him? I can't pay a bill, and I'm all panicky. And he loses everything, aside from all the humiliation. But it doesn't concern him. He stays with God the whole way through. And the Sitra Achra is not convinced yet, because he doesn't stage anything else. So first is the money, and then comes then he inflicts his body. So God says, yeah, you can inflict his body. And you'll see, and then Eov starts to lose it a bit. He starts to, he's good. From what I read, I'm impressed still, but the Sitra Achra is not so impressed. And anyhow, so the whole story, unfolds, and Eov complains to God, and he says, maybe you confused me. The Gemara says that he actually asked God. Maybe you looked in the phone book looking for Oyev, which means enemy, and you found Eov and got mixed up over here, and therefore you got the wrong guy. That's what Eov says to God. You got the wrong guy. Well, what did I do to deserve all of this? And God says, no, we don't make mistakes up here. The Gemara gives examples of how precise God is in the way he runs his world to tell Eov. And then he says to Eov, were you there when I founded the world? Fantastic line. Were you there at the beginning? You think you know everything? You think you understand the whole situation because this happened to you, all of a sudden doesn't make sense to you? But you never considered, even before, when everything was going well, why you even had all that you had. You understand the mechanics of history and the dynamics, of the past, and how it builds to the present and then leading to the future. It's like, how could you, how can we ask anything about God? We don't know the big picture. A slice of it, our own personal stuff. We kvetch. I don't like this. That's fine. That's honest. I don't like the situation. I don't like what happened to me. I don't like where things are going, and it scares me, makes me nervous, etc. Okay, that we can understand. But the question, how is this just? Well, how can you even? You can say, how is this just? God, I just want to know. Obviously, it's just. But how is it just? But. Yeah, he does. He asks the question. God says you can't answer the question, and the story ends off basically in a happy note, where Eov rebuilds his family once again, gets back his property, and happily ever after. But the whole story is so bizarre and so strange. Why? The Gemara learns out from this thing a very famous statement that we use: "Al tiftach pele satan." Don't open your mouth to the Satan. This is very important advice. Very important advice. What does this mean? Don't say anything or do anything that's going to invite divine judgment. That's what that means. Why? Because if you make people jealous, if you do it in a way that that's not normal. If you're acting yourself normally and someone else gets jealous, it's not your fault. Don't worry about it. That's their problem. But if you're going to be flashy, if you're going to be outwardly, flashy, you're gonna display what you have and who you are and be arrogant and attract unnecessary attention to yourself. That opens up the courts in Shemaim, and that brings judgment on a person. And that's what God did. God, have you seen my righteous Eov? Oh, what? Have you seen my righteous Eov? I mean, you're taking me, the Sitrachar, not me, but and you're making me focus on that's whoa, okay, let's do it. Let's look at this person, and of course, the whole thing unfolds in the judgment. So the Gemara says, you see from this, it's not worthwhile to say or do anything. Count, money, in a very outwardly way, because you want the Gemara says very specifically, blessing comes to those things that are hidden from the eye. Modesty, snooze, appreciation, all these traits. But the moment you're going to be outwardly, visible, you make yourself more than is necessary, you invite judgment. That's what the Gemara learns from the story of Eov over here. But this book, falls right into the category that, why the bad things happen to good people? Because Eov is clearly why did bad things happen to good people? He's clearly a tzaddik. He's a righteous person, and bad things happen to him. And what's worse, God's in the picture, and God doesn't explain anything, except for the fact that it's all just, but you can't understand how it's just because it involves too many things you can't know about. But it does say it's just, but people, have built entire philosophies in the book of Eov that have not gone in favor of God because a lot of questions left hanging. So the Arizal comes along and he says the following things. You know why it says Tsaras Oyev, which is an allusion to Tiras Oyev. I have to get them straight in my head. Tiras Oyev, which is an allusion to Tsaras Eov. You know why there's an allusion to Eov's problem here in the Shir Shoyam? Because this is where it begins, right here. This is where Eov's problems begin. The book of Eov begins when the Jewish people have to cross the sea. And God showed them something. It says that even a shifcha, a simple handmaid, had a vision of God and the way he runs the world that even the prophets like Yechezkel and Yeshaya and Yirmiyahu, they didn't have. And they were on very, very high levels. Unique moment in history. And one of the things that God showed them was that Eov was the reason why they were saved. The story of Eov is about this. How? What? Where? Okay, what's the connection? Oh, so we have to go back a bit. Let's go back 116 years before the splitting of the sea. And just in case you're wondering, Eov lived hundreds of years, and you could do it in those days. And he was a righteous person for sure, and he was appreciative of everything, but he made some mistakes. And one of those mistakes were that Pharaoh, aka Pharaoh, right? He had a basin. He had a council, and it was made up of Bilam, right? Parshas Balak, Bilam, the guy to curse us, and Yisro, otherwise known as Yitro, right? Jethro, the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was a famous guy in those days, and Eov. Those were his three prime advisors, apparently, according to the Talmud. And when Pharaoh was trying to decide what to do with the Jewish people, he invited them over and he spoke to them and they talked about it. And Bilam said, kill them, get rid of them. They're we can't have them in the world. He hated us, really did, and that was his vote. And Yisro bravely said, no, leave him alone. It's not worth it. Anyone who tries things like that ends up in trouble at some point. Just let him go. When I send them back to Canaan, fine, but don't harm them, don't hurt them anyway, because God will come after you in the end. And Pharaoh didn't like his advice, and that forced Yisro to run for his life at that point, which he did. And he was, of course, rewarded greatly by, first of all, being the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu, the great Moshe Rabbeinu. He became a convert, and his descendants sat in the Sanhedrin. So, he was in the right crowd. What about Eov? What did Eov do? So the Gemara says that Eov simply said, I don't know. I plead the Fifth Amendment. I don't have to tell you, Pharaoh, I don't want to get involved in this thing. So he was the deciding vote. Now, who says Pharaoh would have listened to him? Doesn't make a difference. That's not what God looks at. God looks at what you did. So if Eve said, I believe that what Yisro said is the right thing, then he would have been rewarded. Even if he got killed in the spot, he would go to the world to come and be incredibly rewarded, but at least in this world too, if possible. He doesn't do that. He abstains. So the vote remains 1 against 1. Paro decides for himself, and of course the rest is right there at the beginning of Parsha Shmos onward. And the Zohar goes one step further. The Zohar says that Eov advised Paro and said to him, you can inflict their bodies and you can take their money, but don't kill them. That's what Eov told. And that's where the Rizal goes, because this is the Zohar. The Zohar is like deeper. It's like more specific, more explicit. And that's what he said, and that's what happened. And Paro took the advice, and he was not only not the deciding vote in favor of freeing them, but he made things worse by going not as far as Bilam, but in that direction. And that's what Paro did in the end. So Eov had a chance to be the vehicle, the reason for their escape from Mitzrayim at that time, and he did not take advantage of the opportunity. He lost it. So, of course, as the Talmud points out, that God works midah keneged midah. He works measure for measure, both for good and for bad. You do a certain type of good deed, God will reward you similarly with a good result that's similar to what you did. If you do a bad thing, the punishment will be very similar to what you did. So God says, 116 years later, you weren't the vehicle for their escape back then when you could have been. Measure for measure, now you're going to be it by the sea. How so? So it says, at the sea, there was a problem. That the angel, the ministering angel of the nation of Egypt, because every nation has its own ministering angel, came before God and said, are you planning to save the Jewish people and drown my people, the Egyptians? That's not fair. That's not just. You know why it's not just? Because the Egyptians, yes, they worship idols and they're bad and etc., etc. That's not what you want. But the Jewish people did the same thing in Egypt too. They also worship idols as well. So either you have to save both or drown both. But you can't save one and drown the other. But the truth is that it was true, except that God had made a promise to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, a bris, a covenant, that he would save the Jewish people. And part of that salvation was to drown the Egyptians for a variety of reasons, but also to make the point that God is the one who saves them. And they were kind of like this, the fall guys, literally into the sea. So what happened? You have this accusation taking place. There's a kitrug, but there's the angel of Egypt and the Minisadin, the angel of judgment, saying to God that you can't do what you plan to do. It's kind of breaking the rules over here. Not really. Just that God works on a higher level that they understand. Nonetheless, but God had to comply to some degree. So what did he do? He knocked off the prosecuting attorney. Got rid of him. And how did he do that? He said, "Oh, by the way, because what's the prosecuting attorney doing? He's watching the scenario down by the sea, pointing out the shortcomings of the Jewish people, and trying to convince God to drown them. Among other problems that the Jewish people had, there's also an idol that was being taken across the sea with Mich, who was from the tribe of Dan. But whatever, that's what he's doing. And in order to remove him from the situation and split the sea, he had to send the Sitra Achra someplace else. And that's where the book of Eov begins. That's why it begins in the middle. God specifically opens his mouth about Eov to attract the attention of the heavenly prosecuting attorney. So he would leave the sea, which he did, and leave the Jewish people free to cross it. And that's what happened. When the story of Eov begins and the angel goes out to go check on Eov, that's when God goes, puts the sea. The miracle takes place. The Jewish people get up across. By the time the Sitra Achra gets back and realizes what's happened over here, it's too late. It's too late. They've already crossed the sea. It's, that's what happens, basically. There's a few details, interesting points along the way to do with chametz and all that, but that's perhaps for another year. But that's what, right there. So the Jewish people were shown this vision of what happened, that the Eov, he got his measure for measure, right there at the sea, the right moment, the right time. And as a result of the Jewish people could have the miracle happen for them, even though they didn't merit that miracle, and they were saved in the process. And God said, you should know what happened over here. I'm going to rip open the heavens and show you the whole story, and they saw it. So therefore, they built into the Shir Shel Yam, the Song of the Sea, in order to allude to it, that we would know about it, and that they would praise God for this unfortunate situation for Eob, but very fortunate for the Jewish people. And the Arizal happens to point out another interesting fun fact that we need to know to understand the story of Eob as well, and that is that Eob was the reincarnation of Terach, who was Abraham's father, and he didn't finish his tikkun, his rectification, while living the life as Terach. He died at a certain point only in the process, and therefore he came back as Eob to finish that rectification. So even though it was kind of like punishment on one hand for not having freed the Jewish people back earlier, it was also not punishment in as much as it was a tikkun, a rectification process for Terach, so he could leave this world in perfection. And all the strings get tied up very nicely, because God can do that. He orchestrates everything down to every last detail to make sure it all works. There's nothing left hanging. We might think things are left hanging, but it never is. God ties it up so beautifully, whether it involves 15 people, 15 million people, 150, it doesn't make a difference. It all gets everybody in the proper place in the proper time. And that's the story of Kriyas Yam Suf that is alluded to when the Shabbos, we have Shvi Shel Pesach, and we say the Shir Shel Yam for the Kriyas Torah, for the Torah reading itself. You can have this in mind. You get to the verse Tiras Oyev that's talking about Tzaras Eob, that how God saves the Jewish people, and how very often things are taking place behind the scenes that we're not aware of to make it happen. That's a very important part of the entire process. But there's another aspect, another element of this entire thing that's important to understand really what it means to have left Mitzrayim. Because as the Haggadah says, everybody has to look at themselves as if they too left Mitzrayim. Talking past tense, meaning that not that we're doing it today, but that if it wasn't for the fact that our ancestors were taken out, we wouldn't be here today as the Jewish people. Might be born in somewhere else, but we wouldn't be the Jewish people, because there would be no Jewish people. So therefore, the fact that God took out our ancestors is kind of like as if we ourselves left as well. So therefore, we too should have the same, or at least a high level of gratitude for Yetzias Mitzrayim. The truth is that, and we spoke about this before in the past, that Mitzrayim is more than a place, it's also a concept. And even though the Haggadah talks about it in the past, it really is an ongoing process. Yetzias Mitzrayim is a work in progress. It was not complete. It was not finished off. Clearly, it wasn't finished off because we never got to the end result, only partially. First of all, we lost 4/5 of the Jewish population, or what was the descendants of Yaakov in Makas Choshech, in the plague of darkness. 12 million Jews, or 50 million Jews before the plague of darkness. 3 million survived. 12 million died in the plague of darkness because they chose to stay in Egypt and not leave with Moshe Rabbeinu and go to Eretz Canaan. The 1/5 that did survive, most of them died off in the desert. Certainly the males between 20 and 60, so almost no one got to Eretz Canaan. Even after 40 years, and we got to Eretz Canaan, we did not wipe out all the Canaanites like we were commanded to by God. And as a result of that, we never fully got the land, and it was never a perfect redemption from the beginning and all the way through. And so therefore, we are in fact in the process of completing what began back then. So even though we have to look at ourselves as if we too left Mitzrayim, the truth is that we have to look at ourselves as if we are leaving Mitzrayim, still in the process, almost like as if frozen in time. So what does it mean to leave Mitzrayim in the end? So I'll tell you, there's an interesting thing. I'm just working on a book right now about Eretz Yisrael, and to try to explain what's the big deal? Why is it so great? Why is it so elevated? Why is it so important? The Gemara makes a statement that says that Eretz Yisrael is the highest land in the world. And it doesn't use a measuring stick to make that point. It uses a verse. This is, the rabbis clearly knew there were higher lands. Even the Golan Heights are not so high. We know even in the Sinai Desert, there are higher mountains. So clearly they knew that Eretz Yisrael was not the physically highest land, right? It means spiritually highest land. But why? How? What makes it so spiritually high? So I'm working on the book right now, talking about what it means on a simple level, on a Kabbalistic level. But one of the points that I sort of got to in this process is discussing the whole concept of reality. Like, what is reality? There's it's a word we throw around all the time, but the truth is it's a very abstract concept. Like, what really is reality? So I looked up an article to see what the scientific world was saying as of today, and they basically identified three aspects or three approaches to reality, three theories of reality. They called it. One was called, actually, let me just bring it up here, because the first one is called, if I can just find it. The first one is called phenomenological reality. As the name suggests, the word phenomenon is in there. As the name implies, this version of reality is based on subjective experience. Whatever you observe is instantly real to you. I mean, not to your neighbor necessarily, but to you. This theory of reality means that unreality is non-existent. Therefore, lucid dreams, hallucinations, spiritual experiences, etc., are all forms of one subjective reality. If it seems real to you, it is, even though it may not be to somebody else. That's one level, one theory of reality. The second level is called consensus reality. This is based upon the opinions and observations made by a group of people. A few individuals may decide on an interpretation of an event, which spreads across entire societies and becomes a consensual truth. Everybody agrees to it, true or false, but that's what they're believing in. Religion, it says, is a good example of socially constructed reality if it is man originated. I have that last part because obviously Judaism is different, right? But if man is the basis of religion, if he's making it up, like every other religion in the world, because no one else says that God came down and spoke to them and gave them a prophecy like that, 3 million people hearing God speak. So that's going to be a socially constructed reality. The last one they call is non-reality. This simply means that there's no such thing as an objective reality. Every possible observation or interpretation is tainted by subjectivity and therefore does not constitute truth because everybody's making up their own version. Nothing is real. As a result, societies form based upon common needs and fears, with cooperation being self-serving and lasts as long as it is. So the important point over here is that what it says at the end, that there's no objective truth, or at least what they're really saying, if there is no objective truth, it's a phenomenal concept. It's saying if there's no objective truth, there is no real reality. There's only subjective reality, and the whole thing could be just one big illusion. In other words, in order to be able to have reality, you have to have some type of truth on a level that's beyond human beings, because human beings are only capable of opinions. They cannot have an absolute point of view because by definition, we're biased. We're built that way. We're wired that way. We're born with a certain outlook, or we're born with a certain soul, but we develop a certain outlook. There are things affecting the way we think that we're not even in touch with. They're so deep-rooted inside, we can never get access to them to know if they're right or wrong or change them. We have hang-ups. We have perspectives. We have opinions. So everyone's subjective. Societies are formed based upon a commonality amongst different opinions, but it's still just opinions. So there's no objective truth amongst men in general by themselves. It's not possible. What about the world? What about the physical world beyond us? Is that like an objective truth? Well, according to quantum mechanics, no. Because even the physical world takes shape based upon the opinions of the people who are observing it. Very abstract concept, but very fascinating, So where is there objective truth, and where is there objective truth? So the only way to get objective truth is to rise above everything. In order for something to be objective, it has to be beyond the world of man. It has to be beyond the physical universe, because the whole physical universe, we're saying, is based upon the opinions of people. How it's going to unfold and all that history is very much a function of people's perspectives and observations. So whoever's going to have this objective, by definition, has to be beyond the physical universe as well. And the only thing that fits that description is God. That is what God is. God is that objective reality, and therefore that objective truth, and therefore God is that objective reality. Tremendous implications. Tremendous implications. But the most important one that really comes out through the Seder and Yitzhak Mitzrayim, what was God really giving to us at Mount Sinai? Not just a bunch of mitzvahs to test our loyalty. That's what it looks like to the person who hasn't latched into it, hasn't got into it, hasn't understood it. But he wasn't doing that. God was giving us reality. Mitzrayim, because of its multitude of gods and beliefs and opinions, by definition, was illusionary. I mean, you could touch it and hit it and feel it, and your senses perceived it, right? But overall, it was transitory. It wasn't based upon any absolute truth. It was just what people felt, what they wanted, what was instinctual, and therefore it was all illusion. Not illusion like the dream, but the truth is your brain doesn't distinguish anyhow. When a person dreams at night when they're sleeping, as far as the brain is concerned, the signals are going up, and you believe it. Your body has to freeze. Your brain has to freeze your body while you sleep, so you won't sleepwalk and act out what you're dreaming. The brain just goes with the signals. So the physical world sends signals too. But if you want to be living in reality, you want to feel real, and there's nothing more exciting than feeling real. And this is people spend good money and take tremendous risks just to feel alive, just to feel real, to confront death, to feel life. And unfortunately, that's tragic. To go so close to death to know that there's a better way. And that's what God was telling the Jewish people when he took them out of Mitzrayim. And that's what God was telling Eov in the story as well. He was telling him that, you understand your whole world and reality, as great as you are, it's still very subjective. And I'm going to prove it to you. Because when all this unfolds and happens to you, and you see what you witness was going on, you're going to see you're going to struggle. You know why? Because you're going to look at the world through your own subjective personal reality. And that, in the end, is going to enslave you. That's going to keep you from coming as close to me as you possibly can. You have to break out of that. So when God took us out of Egypt and became our single God, our one God, and gave us access to him through the Torah, through prayer, he showed us how to access him. He was giving us access to real reality, the ultimate reality, a path to be able to be free of illusion. That's what Egypt is. And every generation, doesn't make a difference if it's Egypt back then, or Babylonia in its time, or Greece, right, or America today, or England, or Canada, or even Israel, for that matter. Doesn't make, if you're living with that lack of objective truth, by definition, you lack real reality in your life. In short, Pesach, we talk about Zman Cheruseinu, the time of our freedom. But freedom from what? Freedom from an illusionary life, from just spinning our wheels and doing things that really don't make a difference in the end. From not really living up to our full potential. Because ultimately speaking, not only is there nothing greater than feeling real in this world, but that's the way you get to the real reality, the ultimate reality of the world to come. It's 8:45. It's obviously a major discussion. Maybe perhaps we'll talk about it a bit more after Pesach too, God willing. But as we go into Shvi Shel Pesach and we contemplate, what it is that we're supposed to become in our lives, the directions we're supposed to take, and what God has given to us in this holiday, this wonderful holiday of Pesach that lasts 7 days here, 8 days in the diaspora. We spend 3 weeks cleaning to have 1 week of, hummus-free house. But as we contemplate all of that, let's really think about and appreciate what the Torah represents, what mitzvahs represent to us. It's not just a way to show God that we are obedient soldiers. It's a good thing too. Nothing wrong with that as well, right? But the main thing is it's our way of accessing higher levels of objective truth. And as we do that, we access higher levels of objective reality, real reality. We actually become alive. It's like resurrection of the dead. We wake up. And that's why you'll find many Bali Tshuva, people who were once secular become religious, talk about the exhilaration of life they never felt before. From doing what? Not from going on a roller coaster, not from bungee jumping, not from jumping an airplane at 25,000 feet, just from sitting and learning a Torah, sitting in a class. This is exhilaration, liberation, because they're approaching objective truth. And therefore they're approaching objective reality, and they're finally feeling alive and real. That's the gift. That's Manche B'Seinu. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.
Thank you so much for another excellent lecture. We want to again encourage those that have not yet done so to go to the rabbi's website, 36.org. There you can find his many books that he has authored, as well as his access to his lectures and other things that he's involved with. We also encourage you to visit our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Israel Torah. And there we would like you to press on this subscribe button and notification button so you can receive this and many other interesting live webinars that we have as they come out. And with that, we wish everybody a happy holiday, Chag Sameach, and we look forward to next week, another exciting lecture coming up. Thank you so much. Be well.
Okay.